And we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's no hellos this evening. This is Pontificating with Pete on Monday night, July 1st. And of course, it is a sort of a somber time to say the least. Obviously, we are well aware of what's going on right now with SCOTUS, and we are very pleased to have a returning guest to our show, somebody that we think extremely highly of because of the risks that he's taken in the name of the people against corporate special interests, most notably Chevron. And of course, we know what Chevron, the landmark decision that was just done by SCOTUS today, effectively allowing the Chevrons of the world to continue their unholy reign of terror against not just the country, but around the world. And so if anybody can speak to just how significant of an issue this really is and who has paid dearly for fighting back against it, and we are, as I said, extremely grateful for all that he has done. This is in what I would call it an opportune time, but the right time to bring back Steven Donziger. Welcome to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change.
Great to be here with you again.
So needless to say, this is a decision that I think we probably saw coming for quite some time. I think the thing that a lot of people don't understand, Steve, and that everybody just kind of lives in this moment, it's not like this SCOTUS decision. I mean, again, there's a lot of SCOTUS decisions that have happened over the past week that a lot of people are very upset about. But while everyone is focusing on the presidential immunity clause that apparently has been enacted, I don't think people truly understand just how bad this deregulation, this Chevron deference law actually is, and what that's going to allow these multinational corporations to get away with. So would love to hear your thoughts on, obviously, your odyssey, what it was like fighting against Chevron all those years, the price you had to pay as a result, and now seeing this come full circle with SCOTUS effectively saying that they can do whatever they want.
Well, thank you for having me. You know, the last few days we've seen a series of Supreme Court decisions that, in my opinion, are horrifying. They're anti-democratic, and if there's one animating theme to these decisions, it's that the court is really trying, in my opinion, to destroy what we used to believe was the rule of law in this country in order to protect powerful, wealthy interests and corporate profits. And these decisions didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, there's been literally a 40+ year sustained planned campaign by the corporate right, by the fossil fuel industry, by the Koch brothers funding network to control the Supreme Court, to do precisely what we have been seeing in the last few days. You know, I want to mention really three of the decisions as an example of this. The first, the Chevron decision. By the way, the Chevron case has nothing to do with my battle with Chevron in Ecuador beyond the fact that it's just another example of corporate power run amok. But what the Chevron decision does is the Supreme Court essentially ruled that any administrative agency in this country is unconstitutional. You know, the way Congress, people need to understand how laws are passed in America. This is not self-evident. It's a little bit technical, but bear with me. Congress passes a law that says, like the Clean Air Act, air must be clean. And then it delegates the authority to a government agency, in this case, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to hire scientists to research these questions and to figure out what standards would create clean air and comply with the law for all sorts of chemicals, dioxins. You know, we saw the dioxins released into the air in East Palestine, Ohio, in the Norfolk Southern train derailment. All of those issues are regulated by our government under laws passed by Congress. Without these specialized administrative agencies to implement laws passed by Congress, in my opinion, the entire federal government pretty much falls apart. Like issues related to environmental protection, clean air, clean water, workplace safety. There's no way to create rules to enforce laws passed by Congress. The court has essentially engaged in a judicial power grab where they're trying to take all of those questions, those technical questions. I mean, tens of thousands of questions like this happen every year in a complex society like the United States with a complex economy. And they're trying to grab them from the administrative agencies and bring them into federal court where they'll all become their own legal case which is just an utter disaster. They basically dismantled the administrative state, which is so necessary to enforcing laws passed by Congress. I mean, Congress can't really pass complex laws. They don't have the expertise. Congress can't regulate how many dioxins can be in the air, to keep like a level of safety. They don't have the expertise. They have to delegate that to the EPA. And the Supreme Court has ruled they can no longer do that. So essentially, every government regulation, every rule to protect us, to protect consumers, to protect people who are victimized by financial fraud, so we can live in a clean environment. That all just got dismantled overnight. I mean, it's really shocking. I actually think it's dumb as hell. If you believe in a capitalist system with mega profits for corporations like exists in the United States, the Chevron decision is still very dumb because there's no way to actually regulate a complex economy that is really oriented toward creating corporate profits without these administrative agencies. So, I think that whole thing is an effort by the extreme right to destroy the role of the federal government, to render government totally dysfunctional as part of a political plan so they can then cite this dysfunctionality that they themselves have deliberately created as evidence government doesn't work. Because government is the only thing left that can actually help people who are being screwed over in our society. They don't want government to exist except for military and policing. They don't want anything to get in the way of these profits because when government gets involved to protect people, there's regulation. Profits go down, even though they're still high, they go down a little bit. They don't want any of that. This is a harrowing decision. There is no complex society. There's no advanced industrial economy in the world that has done this or would ever do this. This is a further weakening of our country at a fundamental level. So the Chevron case, to me, is something they've been chomping at the bit to do for decades. And they finally, through a bunch of shenanigans to get these right-wing extremists on the Supreme Court, got it done this week. And I think the consequences for our country are disastrous.
I definitely agree. I think this is something that's going to reverberate for a very long time. But I almost feel like we're at a point now that the more decisions like this happen, the more people are coming to terms with the fact that corporate special interests have captured our government. That is essentially what this is. I've been saying it forever. There are people who get distracted by the minutia of different issues of the day. And I'm thinking, whether it is presidential immunity, whether it is legalizing bribery, which, let's face it, it's already legal. They just haven't said it officially. And then, of course, you have the criminalization of homelessness. And we see it down here in Fort Lauderdale, where basically if you're caught sleeping on a park bench, they're going to literally, the popo's dragging you out of town kind of thing. And then ultimately, and the worst one of all, because again, everyone is all caught up with Trump. But at the end of the day, this Chevron deference decision is as bad as anything that has ever been rendered by the court. And it's all in the name of corporate profit. And no matter who has to suffer for this, and there will be many that will, it almost boggles the mind that people just think it's acceptable that we can have contaminated water and contaminated air. I don't think it's acceptable. So at what point do people just say it, enough is enough?
Let's take a step back, okay? In my opinion, there's been a judicial coup in this country by the corporate right through six people, 6 unelected Supreme Court justices, okay? 3 of whom were named to the court by presidents, right-wing Republican presidents who never even won the popular vote before they took office. Those 6 people are, in my opinion, illegitimately staging a coup to completely change the character of American society, and they are unelected. 6 people pretty much control, to a great degree, what kind of society we can live in, what kind of freedoms we can have, whether the unhoused who can't afford housing are allowed to sleep outside without being jailed, whether our president is allowed to commit a crime while in office, like Donald Trump did multiple times. Remember the slate of fake electors? He was trying to steal the 2020 election, and the court ruled today that that could be an official act, not subject to criminal prosecution. Why are they protecting Donald Trump? This is a political court. It's an activist ideological court. They try to hide their decisions, act like it's rule of law, and they write these elaborate legal opinions. But in reality, they take political positions through the law. To me, they have no legitimacy. And I don't know what the answer is. I almost think, given the ruling on the presidential immunity, essentially a president can commit a crime while in office and never be prosecuted. Biden should think about literally disbanding this court. Disband it.
Well,
Issue an
he's not
executive
going to.
decree to disband it.
Sure, he's not going to do that, but I don't think that that is out of line. I also think
But
that the other issue here.
obviously he's not going to do it. But
Yeah.
let's start having the conversation, because
Oh, absolutely.
this can't go on. And President Biden, God, there's kind of an intermediate solution, which is to expand the number of justices on the court. But he wouldn't even support that. And this is the same court that basically stole the election from Al Gore and gave it to George Bush. This is
The
the
one
same
election that
court.
was the one election that was stolen.
This is the same court that, in Citizens United, essentially allowed a corporate takeover of the entire American government. I know this firsthand. I was prosecuted by Chevron lawyers who put me in jail for winning a big pollution case against Chevron. And they basically captured a portion of our judiciary. What's that about? But that wouldn't have happened had these series of decisions over the last several years, and have been accelerated over the last week, not been handed down by a political court. People need to stop thinking about our Supreme Court as judges and understand that it's an unelected political branch of government that is on a rampage to take as much power as it can for itself away from the executive branch, that is the president, the administrative agencies, and away from Congress, which also has been seriously weakened by corporate money and can't even get its act together enough to pass the most basic laws. We're done. Okay. We are being run by 6 unelected judges. I'm talking about political power, and executive power has now been shifted into one branch of government, the most anti-democratic branch, the one branch that does not hold elections, and where 3 of the 6 justices who are doing this had essentially had their seats stolen from Democrats, over the last several years. So I'm really upset about this. And I think people need to recognize it for what it is. And I'll say this: the media is reporting on this like, oh, it's bad for the administrative state, or it's going to undermine workplace safety regulations, and it's going to be bad for the environment. Yeah, it's all that. It's worse than that. Okay. This is a wholesale destruction of the federal government, of the function of the federal government. It's not just a problem for certain things, although it's that. They are going after the very idea that we can have a federal government for anything other than the military and policing. That's what this is really about here, in my opinion.
Which by definition is fascism. That is essentially it. The corporate state takes over, and the only thing that matters in terms of federal funding goes directly to the military and to the police states. So, yeah, by definition, that is what it is. Perhaps we would have been on this trajectory regardless of how the 2000 election would have unfolded if Gore became president. But the real problem here is there is no real checks and balances. The whole, government is bad, and everything that they do. I mean, listen, I think the federal government is corrupt, but I also believe that corporate special interests have every intention of destroying this planet. They do not care. And there, a lot of the attitudes, especially of people like the Kochs and what have you, are people that are of a certain age and a certain amount of affluence, where their attitude is, well, if it gets too hot, I'll figure a way out of this. You guys will be screwed, or I'm going to be dead anyway by the time this really becomes a problem, and future generations are going to suffer as a result. So my question to you is, are we getting to the point now where there is going to be a vote of no confidence in the U.S. Economic and political system? Because I think we're getting there, where people just do not trust the system anymore. I'm seeing messages on social media all the time. We should not even be paying taxes anymore. This is insane. I think that's just going to grow more and more exponential as we go forward. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's right. Look, I think the one of the real problems here is the Democratic Party is too weak and too dominated by corporate interests to stand up for the people. And now we're paying the price, because when people don't see an alternative to what's essentially a judicial coup and a right-wing takeover of all 3 branches of government, when the one party that is supposedly liberal doesn't fight against it hard enough and doesn't, take the most basic positions in favor of working people, we don't have a system in this country where those who are getting screwed over, the majority of people, have a vehicle to express themselves politically, because the two-party system has a stranglehold on politics, and they're both corporate-dominated parties. What we need to do, in my opinion, is form a new party, a labor party. We need a labor party that represents labor interests, green interests, and stop playing the game of constantly voting for a Democratic Party that, in my opinion, has become a handmaiden to this corporate takeover of our country. We just can't do it anymore. Now, I'm not suggesting people don't vote for Biden. I'm not even getting involved in that for this upcoming election. But we must recognize that we are on a fool's errand if we keep voting for a corporate-dominated Democratic Party that fails to address the fundamental problems afflicting our society in an effective way. It does not. And I would argue that's one of the main reasons why this judicial coup, what I call a judicial coup, is happened in full force. There's no opposition strong enough to stop it under our current two-party system, and that needs to change.
I definitely agree. That's one of the reasons why this lady is running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and as others are, but again, the real problem that we face is that so many of these races become so difficult to, first of all, there is strategy that's involved, but at the same time, it is so expensive to run in these races and to get your message out there. So it's just kind of it's this death by 1,000 paper cuts, if you will. And that's just kind of how we've been looking at it for so long.
There's no normal democracy that lets corporations and outside interests spend as much money as they want to
Of
either
course.
elect or defeat a candidate. Like, look what just happened to Jamal Bowman. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not democracy. That's
No.
plutocracy. It's
But
sort
what's
of like
amazing
feudalism. It's letting the rich control who gets elected. I mean, that's not democracy.
But one of the real dangers, and this is what you brought up, which is true about the two-party duopoly that we're still stuck in right now. But I think I feel like we're getting to a point where it is turning into a vote of no confidence, and people don't want it anymore. So
I mean, I
it's
think
not
I
a
think
question of if.
we could organize a national referendum of no confidence in the U.S. political system, and I bet it would pass. Because
Yeah, and
that would unite people from across the political spectrum. People are extremely frustrated, and they see
And
what's
how could you
happening.
not be? I mean, think about
Yeah,
it. Think about what happened to you, but think about what it means for everybody else. And when people think about, well, why are we allowing this to happen? Well, let's see. We've got no health care. We cannot afford and will likely never be able to afford to buy a home, especially if you're a millennial on down. You're not going to be able to have a clean environment because, lo and behold, and when everybody talks about climate change, all I need to tell people is whether you believe it or not, here's who does believe climate change is real. Insurance companies believe it's real, and they are making sure that you can't afford shit. So if you think that it's not real, talk it with them, and then you're wondering, oh my God, I can't afford this. Why can't you? Because sea level rise and heat, all these things matter. And then you factor in clean water and clean air, of which very few have. Flint, Kalamazoo, East Palestine, those are just several of hundreds, if not thousands, of examples that exist all over the country that this has become a problem. The scary part is that there is still this tribalism factor that is a problem. So when people were satisfied, let's say those who were living in Westchester County, obviously you're in Manhattan. And so for people that are okay with what just happened out in the burbs, they're okay with it because it happened on their side. Their side, it's okay when their side gets it. But if somebody else's side gets it that they don't agree with, then all of a sudden it's a problem. And so the tribalism factor is still something we have to break through in this country. Any thoughts on how we get past that? Because that is still something that people are really clinging tightly to, is their tribalism in this broken political system we now find ourselves in.
I don't. I mean, respectfully, I think the better question to ask is how do we deal with the divisiveness of extreme wealth and income inequality? That's where the tribalism comes in. The wealthy and the privileged don't want to give anything up. They don't want to spread the money around. I mean, no wealthy society in the world is structured like ours. I mean, everyone else has a proper tax rate, health care that's available to everyone. solid public education. I mean, you couldn't design a worse wealthy society in the world than what exists right now in the United States. It's just unbelievable. So I think that the lack of unity is by design. I think the entities that benefit from the divisiveness, from the tribalism, um, foment it through control of the media and um, through the way they do business. I mean, these Supreme Court decisions in the last few days are a perfect example of that. I mean, they are completely divisive. They are not trying to bring the country together. They are almost happy and delighted to divide it. And they're like, we have the power. The message of the Supreme Court and this whole right wing funding network is sorry, Americans, you don't like it? F you. We have the power, and there's nothing you can do about it. There used to be a time when I was your age, okay? They tried to hide it. There was this facade of the rule of law. At this point, they just don't even try to hide it. I mean, people are
Right,
onto them. They're
right
like,
out
they're
in the
like,
open.
they're like, we have the power. It's in the open. There ain't nothing you can do about it. We control the police. We control the military. We control the Congress. We control the Supreme Court. We control most of the rest of the federal courts. And, we usually control the executive branch. I mean, even when a Democrat is in, Biden is so beholden, for example, to the fossil fuel industry that he's allowed, more oil and gas leases on federal lands than even Trump did. So even the Democrats are so kind of beholden to fossil fuel interests that they have a really hard time dealing with climate change issues in a deep kind of way. So we don't have an alternative. We have sort of two main political parties that are both very dominated by corporate interests. One of which is pretty much completely controlled and owned by corporate interests. The other is heavily influenced by them. And that's too narrow a choice. We need a different kind of political vehicle. We need a labor party in this country. We need new leadership, and we need rules so a third party or a fourth party or a fifth party can get on the debate stage during presidential elections and can get financing to compete in these elections. So those ideas, creative ideas, ideas that are viable, can be put into the conversation and covered by the media. But like right now, it's not happening. I mean, damn, you saw the debate last week. Wow. I mean, where was RFK Jr.? Where was Marianne Williamson? Where was Cornel West? Where was Jill Stein? Okay, I don't care what you think of any of those people. The reality is they all have ideas that are creative, interesting, innovative, that neither Biden or Trump would ever put out there. Okay, so why is CNN conspiring with the two major corporate dominated political parties to prevent people from participating in a national televised debate, that like the one we saw last week? And it's obvious, they all benefit from the same closed system. And it's, in my opinion, it's completely undermining the rule of law and democracy, and is on the verge of really ruining this country. I mean, look, we have a lot of problems, man. I'm not like thinking this is a great country. Over the course of my lifetime, it's gotten a lot worse compared to what I felt it was when I got out of law school, say in the early 90s. But like, we have to recognize this, we're in serious, serious trouble right now.
I definitely agree. We are in serious trouble right now, but I think because most people, I think, are recognizing that we're in serious trouble is usually when action is going to be
Yes,
taken.
I
And
agree. And, and,
so,
and, and that something good can come of this because, why pretend anymore? Let people see it for
oh
what it
no,
is. Yeah.
and I got to tell you, I actually like this idea, and we can close on this note. I actually like this idea of the Democrats continuing to go with Biden because the more people see what a faux system this really is now, you claim that Donald Trump is the end all be all of existential threats, that he is the second coming of Hitler, Mussolini, whatever. Our democracy, we're not a democracy, is hanging in the balance, but let's just assume that it actually exists. If that were the case, and you saw what happened in the debate the other night, that wasn't a bad debate. That may have been historically the worst that's ever existed in presidential politics. And so the attitude despite the fact that everyone came out and said, Joe's got to go. This is not acceptable. We got to at least make an effort to win, even if Trump gets in. I even said the other day, listen, Trump is likely to get in again, but at least make him earn it. You are literally handing this over to him. So my thought is, if they're going to continue with Biden, they are facilitating this. You want to call it a revolution? Call it whatever you want. Some people don't like the R word, but to me, if we're going to get to a point where people are finally going to take action, they are going to, as a collective, we're going to need to look at this and say, I ain't doing this anymore. This can't be the way it has to be. It can definitely be better. Don't expect me to support this anymore. I'm not doing it. I think by Biden coming out today saying we're staying in the race, okay, watch them circle the wagons and everyone pointing to them saying you're all a bunch of frauds. You don't believe in anything. You're bought by the system. We've had enough of it. Do you think that by Biden staying in, that this is only going to accelerate this much needed change even faster?
It's hard to say. I think it's always a mistake to focus too much on personalities as opposed to systemic problems. I think Biden, he needs to really step up and do a lot better. However, if the Dems were to replace Biden with somebody else, I don't necessarily think it would be any better. The system has so weakened the Democratic Party that it's very hard to get anything. If Gavin Newsom, for example, were to go in there, it would be really hard. I mean, there's no one individual who can really change this, okay? This has to come from the bottom, from grassroots organizing, from mass mobilization. I like the idea of a no confidence measure in the government. I like the idea of a general strike like many European countries do. We never do that in this country, where people just stop working,
Yeah.
and really provoke energy that can create real change. And I'll also say, I got to go in a second, if you don't mind. I mentioned I was prosecuted by Chevron. I helped indigenous peoples in Ecuador win the largest environmental judgment ever, $10 billion against Chevron. And they prosecuted me in the first private corporation in our history, a private corporate prosecution in our history. I was denied a jury. I spent almost 3 years in detention. I'm the only lawyer ever to spend even 1 day in detention for a misdemeanor contempt of court charge, which in my opinion was baseless. I'm seeking a pardon right now from President Biden. And if people can help sign our petition or donate so we can make this happen, we have a website called freedonziger.com, FREEDONZIGER. Please help us, join our campaign, give us your email so you can be on our list. We'll give you updates about this battle, because the people of Ecuador, the Amazon communities who won the judgment, who I helped for over 30 years, still have not gotten their recovery. They're suffering. Many have died, and we need to really deal with this problem. It's one victory that needs to be fully realized. So one way you can help make that happen is to support my pardon campaign. And by the way, I actually believe Biden should pardon me. I mean, we can't have corporate prosecutions. Even by their rules, we shouldn't have corporate prosecutions. So it's not a close call conceptually, but only really political pressure is going to get them to act and deal with it. So again, it's freedonziger.com.
I'll be supporting. Guys, make sure that you get over to the website. Make sure you sign the petition. If you can contribute financially, that'll help as well. Steve is a hero to me, as he is to many others. It takes a lot of courage to do what he did. Proof is in the pudding. Steve and I were in each other's presence, and an ankle bracelet was there. So I can tell you he is all that and more. I really cannot say enough about how much I appreciate you and respect you for what you've done. I know the fight's not over, and know there's a lot more to go, but try to enjoy yourself out there if you can.
Yeah, I'm in a writer's retreat. I'm actually writing a book, but I want to tell you, back at you. I love your show. I love your leadership. I'm happy to be on your show anytime you want. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Appreciate you as well, brother. Sending my best, and we're all behind you. Just know that and that's the thing about this fight and how we're going to make it happen. It's very easy to feel alone in this battle, but when you recognize that you got the wind at your back, because there really are a significant amount of people who truly believe in what you're doing and what we're all trying to do here, it's only going to grow more and more. And unfortunately, as the old saying goes, the night is darkest before the dawn. And I kind of feel we're there right now, but we are going to get somewhere. I feel like we are in a watershed moment. I know everyone thinks their lifetime it's that, but this really is something very unique that we're in right now. So hang on tight. Keep fighting the good fight, and we'll definitely be talking again soon.
Thanks so much. Peace out. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So as you can imagine, I think extremely highly of Mr. Donziger and everything that he has been through. So links are in the description. Make sure that you get to that. I mean, look, we can only surmise, just how bad this can potentially get, because again, it is a rogue system. You can point at the president. You can point at, you could point at SCOTUS. There's a lot of things you could do, but at the end of the day, corporate special interests have captured our government. That's it. And the people that we've elected, they're bought by these corporate special interests. Our congressional representative, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is bought by these corporate special interests, hook, line, and sinker, across many, many different corporate special interest industries. The military-industrial complex, big oil, big pharma, big sugar. It's all connected. So when a decision is rendered that basically we are not going to have any regulation anymore, well, now we have to deal with that down here in Florida. Red tide, blue-green algae, sea level rise, contaminated water, air, housing stability or lack thereof. It's all connected. So when it becomes a vote of no confidence, that is ultimately when things are supposed to change. And there is a difference between despair and anger. If you are as angry as I am, because I don't get despair, I just don't. I have too much of a burning desire in my being, especially when it comes to this campaign, because we have to be able to change what we can control. We cannot control the presidency right now. We can't do that. But what we can do is control a very important election here locally that can be won. I'm not saying that Jen unseating Wasserman Schultz is going to change everything, but my God, it'll change a lot. It'll definitely be a shot across the bow that we desperately need right now. These fights that we take on, they're not easy. But anything that's worth fighting for, it's never gonna come easy. You're gonna have to fight tooth and nail to get it. And even then, it's not necessarily enough. And Andrew, here's what I will say. I have always maintained that if Wasserman Schultz did not do what she did during the Democratic primary in 2016, if it was a fair fight and Hillary won over Bernie, Hillary would have won the presidency. But instead, they decided it was necessary to rig the primary. I believe if the primary was fair, Bernie would have won. But it wasn't fair. And by doing that, it split the party. And Trump became the president in many ways because he bought Bernie's rhetoric. He made it his own. And millions of people went over to Trump, and they haven't left him. And that's how we've gotten here. Remember, when the system is falling apart, people are going to fight for survival. They're not necessarily thinking about what's coming 10 years down the road. That's not on their mind. Their mind is, how am I going to afford to live? So when Trump talks about we're totally bringing the jobs back to America, we're totally dealing with China. Look, whether he's full of it or not, more often he is. When you're desperate, it's easy to see why people are going to go for it. Because whatever Biden and the Democratic establishment is selling, it's not any better. It's just not. And you insult everyone's intelligence. You do that every day by telling everybody that everything's okay. And let me assure you, they're going to keep doing it in spite of what just happened with SCOTUS. They're going to continue to tell you, just go vote and vote for us because we're better than them. Are they really? At least one side's going to fight. That's better than nothing. And as much as I pain to have to do this, we're going to do it. The Democratic Party, but more specifically President Biden, has made it clear that he is not going anywhere, despite what happened at the debate on Thursday night. Well, Let's look at some of what the president had to say that gives people any confidence that this guy, with all due respect, is going to be alive for another 5 years. Here we go.
The issue of immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch, overwhelming border states and overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed my position. In addition to that, we found ourselves.
First of all, that is not true. That is a lie. They did not endorse him. In fact, they actually came out and said, yeah, that's not true. We did not endorse you at all. Here's the problem. And I've been saying this forever when it comes to immigration. I am not anti-immigration, but I am for regulatory immigration. Very, very conservatively. And why is that? The reason why we have this immigration crisis is very simple. There is an uprising in the labor movement in this country, demanding a living wage, demanding health care, demanding time off, benefits. You know what the powers that be do when that starts to happen? They open up the floodgates at the border and bring in cheap labor. So everyone is screwed in the process. They get richer, the wages go lower, and the country suffers as a result, and more people are put into poverty. This is what happens when you deregulate everything. So when the president is out here talking about, we're going to do this bipartisan effort on immigration, it's never going to stop unless we have an infrastructural change in this country. That's the difference. I think hundreds of thousands of immigrants are useful idiots, and they're not idiots in the sense that they don't know any better. They're being brought here to work jobs for pennies on the dollar. If you can't get somebody to work in the Amazon warehouse for the amount of money that they declare is appropriate, for you to basically work like a slave, because that's essentially what the shipping business has become, because industrialized online business is everything now. So many businesses have they've closed up, shop. We don't have interpersonal communication the way that we once did. The shopping malls are nothing like what they once were. So if people are going to work, they're going to work for the wage that they're going to be offered, because everything's become monopolized. There's no competition for Amazon. Small business America can't compete with that anymore. I do everything in my power not to shop at Amazon. It's once in a blue moon that I have to get something that I can't get anywhere else. When people want to make a living wage, when they start to unionize like they did in Staten Island, this is what ends up happening. They're not going to give in. They're just going to do what they have to do to maintain the bottom line, to maintain the status quo. That's where the immigration issue comes into play. People can surmise it to be something that it isn't, but that's what it is. We'll continue.
In a situation where, when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look,
got like he's channeling a George, totally channeling a Bush right there. He's got the Bush. He's looking directly into the sun, and Biden's like, it's so bad. It's bad. But man, if that ain't a great screenshot, I don't know what is. So I've stated my position, and I'm sticking to it. Until labor has the uprising that it needs to have in this country, this is going to continue. And that's the reality of, when people want to talk about, well, what is it that we're supposed to do here? It's a problem. But that's what Steve mentioned before, which is true. Big problem is that we do not have a Labor Party. If we had a Labor Party, it would be nothing like this. But we don't have one. And that is something that we need. Here we go.
You've put forward a proposal to resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages, and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes.
Number one, everyone from the United Nations Security Council straight through to the G7 to the Israelis and Netanyahu himself have endorsed the plan I put forward. Which has 3 stages to it. The first stage is trade the hostages for a ceasefire. Second phase is a ceasefire with additional conditions. The third phase is the end of the war. The only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas, number one.
That's not true. That's another lie. Everybody talks about how much Trump lied in the debate, and obviously he can't help himself either. But this is patently false. Israel does not want to end this. Israel wants a ethno-state. Netanyahu's government wants an ethno-state. So you can say it's Hamas all you want, but that's if you come to that conclusion, then you're ignoring completely what's going on in the West Bank. And notice how Dana Bash, who is an avowed Zionist, would not mention the West Bank. She mentioned Gaza, which of course has been completely obliterated so they can, don't have to explain. But the point is, he continues with that talking point. He continues with this talking point of it's just Hamas. Hamas is the problem. And if we just got rid of Hamas, everything will go back to normal. You're not getting rid of Hamas. When you murder 20,000 innocent children, what do you think is going to happen? How many terror cells are going to pop up as a result? This is what an occupation looks like. And this is what a massacre looks like. We'll continue.
The only one standing out. We're still pushing hard to get them to accept. In the meantime, what's happened? In Israel, we're finding the only thing I've denied Israel was 2,000-pound bombs. They don't work very well in populated areas. They kill a lot of innocent people.
They don't work very well in populated areas. No, I think they work just fine, just as they're intended to. I don't know how you choose a word like that. They don't work very well. No, actually, they do. That's the point. 2,000-ton bomb. You're giving them weapons like that? This really just comes down to one simple variable. Trump isn't nice, and Joe tries to be nice. But you're still getting the same result. That's the problem. And that's why very few people care when Trump comes out and says, you're just like a Palestinian. You're you're just like, again, and now Palestinian has become a slur. Now it's not even about Hamas. Now it really is just cat's out of the bag. Now, granted, Trump apparently did take $100+ million from, is it Miriam Adelson? Sheldon Adelson's widow. Money talks, justice walks.
Providing Israel with all the weapons they need and when they need them. And by the way, I'm the guy that organized the world against Iran when they had a full-blown intercontinental ballistic missile attack on Israel. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it just stopped. We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world. And so there are two different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our intelligence people as to how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden. You don't have to do it. And by the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, greatly weakened, and they should be. They should.
When you talk about Iran and you talk about we didn't really attack them and everybody was against them. No. The world is against Israel and the United States. It is statistically proven across the board. There's a few nations sprinkled in, including the UK, but even in the UK, they have dissension amongst the ranks as far as where they stand on this issue. And of course, my country of Ireland is firmly behind the Palestinian people. But continuing with this bullshit, it's really tough to take. It is. And I agree. Trump is not going to make it any better. He's just not. Which is all the more reason why finding yourself inspired to try to take things in another direction is how it begins. Your vote has to be earned. It can't just be a given. And this is also the reason why it's so significant pertaining to Trump. If the election were held now, Trump is going to win easily. He's now up in New Hampshire. If Trump wins a state like New Hampshire right out of the gate, the election could be a landslide. It could be that bad. And the reason why win or lose, it again, what you're kind of looking at now is if it's a loss, like how bad of a loss is it? How many seats are going to get flipped in the Senate and in the House? That's the problem. Not having that inspiration on the ground is a big deal.
Be eliminated, but you've got to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to you.
Totally got this guy I got him in my mitts. He's totally finished. I am offended by that, Jules. I happen to like New Hampshire. I don't think that's appropriate. But, maybe so, Metal, but you can't tell me that SCOTUS decision isn't a bad one, because it is. Nevertheless, let's see what else the president has to say.
Nobody's coming up this way.
You moved it up too soon, Colin.
That $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America.
Okay, first of all, I don't care that that's not a senile moment where he said trillionaire, billionaire. That's a slip of the tongue. Whatever. Here's the problem. You have the authority. You have the authority to overturn Trump's tax cuts, and you're not doing it. Just like Obama did not overturn Bush's tax cuts. He made them permanent, and you're going to make them permanent too. So I don't know who you think you're impressing. Unless you're really going to put teeth to something, everything is just one washes one hand, the other washes the other. That's it. I mean, that is it. I live in a world where everything is black and white. There's some shades of gray once in a while. But if you're going to complain about the economic circumstance of this country, particularly when it comes to the ever-growing wealth gap amongst the rich and the poor, and especially the working poor, which used to be the working class and even the middle class, but now it's not there anymore. So the $2 trillion tax cut, which benefited the rich over 80%, if you're not going to overturn that, then you're just blowing smoke. Keep going.
And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers. They'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
We finally beat Medicare. Well, the truth is, in some ways you did by saying that you would veto a Medicare for All bill if it came to your desk. That's not all. The other problem here is simply this. Even if he didn't have what was probably the most senior moment of the night that just happened right now, he doesn't instill any confidence. You cannot look at this man and think that he's capable of running the country for another 5 years. You just can't. And if you do, you're lying or you're being paid to lie. So it's one or the other. And we know who those people are. I don't have to name them. You know who the people are that are out there making excuses, like David Hunter says, excuse, excuse, excuse. Why exactly are we trying to sell this notion that this guy is capable of running this country? He isn't. Have we reached the point of no return? Is Trump at a point now where he simply can't be beaten and they're just going to take whatever chance they've got by sticking with this guy who could keel over at any moment? At any moment. And when the 5-alarm fire is sounded and people are saying we've got to move on, we've got to go in another direction, and you still insist on sticking with it, don't blame the voters. People want change. Biden just happens to be at a point where the acceleration of that change is going to get ramped up to an 11. What that's going to mean for RFK, what that's going to mean for Jill Stein, what that's going to mean for Chase Oliver, what that's going to mean for Dr. Cornel West, I don't know. But the closer we get to the election, the more people are going to look around and just say, well, if Biden's going to lose, then I really have nothing to lose. I'm going to vote how I'm going to vote. Biden has no momentum. He has no boots. It's kind of inevitable. And the one thing we know that they've been doing constantly, they've been doing this for years. The Democratic establishment only knows fear. That's all they can sell, because they can't sell you on this idea that they're going, that they're all going to all of a sudden, find themselves in a situation where they're going to have like this attack of conscience, if you will. That's not happening. We are where we are. And I'm not saying that people necessarily need to be inspired. I think voting is a civic duty. I think everybody should do it. But I also believe that despair can set in, indifference can set in. And while I agree, Donald, that it is on the voters only to this extent, I hold those that don't vote accountable. Because there's a lot of people who don't vote but love to complain about how bad things are. If voting didn't change anything, then they wouldn't work so hard to make sure that you couldn't do it. Are the systems rigged? Sure. But you've got two choices. You can either die on your feet or live on your knees. Choose. I won't live on my knees. We'll finish this up.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
I mean, he just kind of set him up. He made it too easy. I don't like where we are. And I don't like the fact that we have a president that clearly isn't putting the interests of the country first. but I wouldn't accuse Trump of putting the interests of the country first either. So here we are. We're stuck. Where we're not stuck is locally and statewide. We got Jen's election on August 20th. We need all the help we can get. We also have a ballot initiative that we're trying to take to get passed, which we're going to need all the help we can get on that as well. Well, 2 ballot initiatives for that matter. Amendment 3, which is cannabis legalization with home grow, and Amendment 4, which is women's reproductive freedom. All those matter. You're going to have a much easier time convincing people to vote for something like that than you are convincing them to vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I can tell you that much. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Colin, what are the other 2 videos?
The last 2 are the other Supreme Court ruling on immunity, and that other one is just a clip from a protest there. The very first one.
So that's SCOTUS talking? Okay.
I should say, to clarify, the 2 related to the SCOTUS, one is Biden's response, and the other is just a old video from
looks like Sam Alito from a long time ago.
Yeah.
We talk constantly about how our system just keeps breaking at the seams. And now you're seeing it for what it's worth. And it sucks. But as I've often suggested, corporate special interests, the only thing that they know and understand is what is best for their bottom line. And the country be damned if they don't get what they want. And that is the issue of our time. Unraveling that corporate control. I would say only labor can save us, Chip. The unions definitely are important, but it is the labor movement itself that will save us. That's the key. So, knowing what we know now and knowing what the president or what President Trump would be able to do with the power that he now apparently will have if he gets back into the White House, this is what President Biden had to say earlier today.
The presidency is the most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that can test your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, you also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's...
Yeah, but you were a big part of why those things happened, Mr. President. Although he looks like he's channeling his inner Trump with his very orange-colored foundation that he put on before he went live. Yes, he's handling himself decently enough during this speech, but you can't deny what these problems are or where they lie. All of this is all well and good, but this again gets back to many of those problems that we've talked about. You have to be able to inspire, especially when it comes to independent voters. When it's been established consistently now that that inspiration is not there. And when I hear people talk about him being this virtuoso president that has done amazing things. No, he hasn't. He's done a couple of good things. But even if you took away what's going on in Gaza, and clearly you can't, they just want to pretend like that genocide isn't happening. But here's the thing. In your first 100 days, you didn't push through the PRO Act, which is what was really going to be your signature policy. You could have undone right-to-work laws in the United States, and that would have been an incredible boost to the labor movement. Didn't do it. And then when it came the opportunity to pass a $15 minimum wage, which you absolutely could have done, no questions asked, the parliamentarian says, I can't do it. Even though Mitch McConnell's always been able to overstate or overtake the parliamentarian. He always did. Well, the power's back in the states. Codify Roe at the state level. That's just kind of how it's going to be. But one of the biggest reasons why they get away with what they get away with is simply this. We are not involved. We are not a nation that gets involved in politics the way that we need to. Our voter turnouts are dreadfully low, especially in primaries, especially when the people that really, when you recognize that the only way they're going to leave office is in a primary. The voter turnouts are always abysmal. That's a big problem. So there's a reason why this goes on. Now, granted, the system is what it is, but there is no question that our lack of participation plays a really, really big role. And in a place like Camden, it's certainly understandable. And New Jersey is one of the bluer states. But what do? Nothing. The only thing they're going to try to do to Camden is turn it into a gentrification project. That's all. The original Campbell's Soups distribution center is in Camden, New Jersey. It's an abandoned building that's been there for many, many years. It's kind of a reflection of how things have gotten so bad. It's sort of like a standalone, those jobs are not coming back, kind of like what like Springsteen sings in my hometown. It's kind of like that. But therein lies the problem with the system. They say in socialism that you eventually run out of other people's money. Well, in capitalism, you eventually run out of people to exploit. And that's kind of where we are now. So apparently, this is one more video clip pertaining to SCOTUS. And Lord knows how entertaining this might be.
The president is above the law. No person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law. It has been a particular honor for me to serve on the Court of Appeals for these past 15 years because it has given me the opportunity to use whatever talent I have to serve my country by upholding the rule of law. And there is nothing that is more important for our republic than the rule of law. No person.
I mean, again, when you start talking like this and you look back on it now, you know that it's not true. The corruption is so thick. And here's the problem with Alito, as well as the problem with somebody like Justice Thomas. And this is sort of the problem that we're faced with right now. If Biden was somehow to win again, Alito will just hang around until the next election when almost assuredly a Republican will get in 28, and then he'll step away. And if Trump does get in, he will, as will Justice Thomas, almost assuredly retire. And Trump will appoint 2 more Supreme Court justices. Why? Because this is how the GOP fights for what they want. They fight to the death. The only way Thomas and Alito leave the Supreme Court when a Democrat is in office is if they die. That's it. Scalia died, and they still figured out a way to delay it long enough so that they could get their own guy on there. Again, it's the Harlem Globetrotters versus the Washington Generals. That's what this is. That's why Alito when he was being nominated during the Bush administration, is able to get away with the shit he gets away with. Anything.
Person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law, and no person in this country is beneath the law. 15 years ago, when I was sworn in as a judge of the Court of Appeals, I took an oath. I put my hand on the Bible, and I swore that I would administer justice without respect to persons, that I would do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I would carry out my duties under the Constitution and the laws of the United States.
Well, clearly he didn't mean that. And the level of desperation that is there for so many people is so hard for people to understand. And when you make statements like the notion that the two major parties are equally bad is just wrong. No, they are bad. I didn't say they were the same, but they are terrible because they're corporate captured. Now, you can say that one may be worse than the other, but when they're that bad and the prospects are so bad for everyone, and it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. It's death by a nosedive or death by 1,000 paper cuts. Either way, you're going. And the system is going, and everything that's happening is happening under a Democratic president. And we can say that, well, it was put in place for this, it was put in place for that. Again, it's all relative when you consider that this is the system that we're in. And the system's broken. And the reason why Jen runs as a Democrat is because it's strategy. I'm a registered Democrat. I've been one forever. I don't want to be in the Democratic Party, but I also understand that this is this is how it is. Being strategic is important. A lot of people don't know how to do that. If we're trying to change what is in front of us, you got to start somewhere. Everybody has a role to serve. But remember, if it's captured by corporate special interests, then that's where it begins, that's where it ends. I don't know what's going to happen. I know that people are scared. And I know things are pretty dire. Colin, can you just pull up the Intercept article with the cover headline regarding the 62 Democrats that voted in favor with the GOP in favor of withholding information regarding the death count in Gaza? We'll close on that note. You know, there's a great saying, David, and it was from Thomas Jefferson. And it's very similar to what that saying is. When the people fear the government, you have tyranny. When the government fears the people, you have liberty. And that is true. Right now, I don't know if it's that people fear the government, but I know that they are of great concern. That's a problem. I worry. I think we are in bad shape. I don't think that we are I don't know if it's time for aliens. But that is kind of where we are. Tricky spot. Here's me article. American politics sounds like slavery and subservience. Okay, while we're waiting. So, as you can imagine, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is one of the 62 Democrats who joined 207 Republicans in vote to conceal Gaza death toll. Democratic leaders did not tell members to vote against an amendment to block the State Department from citing the Gaza Health Ministry statistics. Now, why would they do that? Because that's what AIPAC and the Israel lobby wanted them to do. The more people know about the numbers, it's kind of like in Vietnam when they showed the aircraft carriers with the American flag draped coffins. That really turned the tide for millions in this country regarding the war, not just the Tet Offensive. So here we are today when you have this big problem where you have bad Democrats. There are quite a few of them. The person who wrote this bill is Jared Moskowitz. He is the congressional representative who is just north of where we are in South Florida. He covers Boca Raton and Parkland, two of the wealthiest suburbs in South Florida. And very Jewish and very Zionist. And they decided to pass this bill. They are covering a genocide, or covering up a genocide. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz, of course, is one of those 62 Democrats that thinks it's acceptable to do that. I don't. It'd be nice if we had people fighting on the Hill that actually wanted to make sure that there was something to be done about our runaway cesspool of a broken system. So that's why, again, I cannot emphasize enough how important this primary race really is. I ask that you all get involved if you can. To everyone who's been here this evening, you know, like my music, Travers, David Hunter, Metal, Donald James, Ghislaine Conspiracy Theory, Nodal Pump, Jimmy Zimzam, Henry Kajawa, H, Yes But No, Jules T, I believe is new, Mario, I believe I said your name, Travers, Chris Garrett, Nashoba Chomak Shuti. I hope I got that right. Miss Chewy Says, Ray J. Who else? Very lively chat tonight, and very appreciative that you guys are here, of course. Make sure you did smash the like button, share, and subscribe, and click the bell. Steve Grossman. Jennifer Perlman. Yeah, why not? Help her get her lady parts back. Try and take them away. Danny Ferguson. I think you're new, Danny. Happy to have you here. Make sure you've clicked that like button. Make sure you subscribed. Make sure you click that bell. Come back for more. I don't know what we're going to do regarding, well, we're not going to have a show on Thursday. It is the 4th of July. Usually my favorite holiday, but I'm catching heat for that one. Linda Fontes, always great to have you here. So maybe we'll do a show on Wednesday night. We'll see. Or maybe Friday. You never know. We'll see about that. You want Wednesday or Friday, guys? Let me know what you're thinking in the chat. 72 Marshflower 15. Welcome to the channel. I can't say I disagree with you, buddy. It's like literally pouring gasoline on a fire. That's what they did. And it's only gotten worse. And then, of course, the anti-Semitism rises because of that. So it's all connected. That's how they do it. Rogant, thank you for checking in. Appreciate you being here. Elvis's cat, great to have you here as well. Thank you for checking in. Tori Baltimore, thank you for coming. And I think that, and of course, Chip. Great to have you here, Chip. Jay Boggs, great to have you as well. Kimmy, Vape King. Well, you guys have really been alive in this chat tonight. No question about it. Holly Horn, great to see you, of course. Salma Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Desiree DeBellis. And Tony DeMayo. Couldn't have said it better. All right, I'm getting Friday. I'm getting Friday from everybody. You're not getting Wednesday and Friday, David. Don't get greedy. It looks like Friday is the answer I'm getting from most of you guys. Okay. Well, don't have a nervous breakdown. Breathe in, breathe out. Into nose, out the mouth, as Mr. Miyagi would say. That's what you got to do. All right. It seems like Friday is what I'm getting from most of you guys. So if it works for you guys, Friday night, it looks like that's when we're going to come back. You know, the 4th of July is supposed to be a day of just remembering why this country is great, and it can be great. It can be great again, not in a way that some people are suggesting. But like Ben Franklin said, it is a republic if you can keep it. And right now, we're not keeping it. It's turning into a complete oligarchy, and it's creeping towards fascism. That's a dangerous place to be, especially when you've got millions of people with nothing to lose. So keep that in mind. The change we seek will only come when we collectively work together and realize that this is about those who have all the power and those who are struggling to just have a semblance of a decent life. That is our fight for all of you guys. It really speaks to this need right now in this moment to figure out how we can collectively come together and make things happen. It's not going to be easy. But as I said, the night is darkest before the dawn. The more bad things that happen, like what happened today, there's that many more people who now have a vote of no confidence in this system, which means that it is inevitable that it will change. It has to. Because the people are just not going to take it. At some point, it's not going to happen anymore. And I always believe that if it's going to happen, it has to happen in an accelerated process. It has to happen in such a dramatic way that you can't turn away. And I think a lot of people are not going to turn away now. So let's fight the fight. Let's get Jen to Capitol Hill. And let's at least have some semblance of an opportunity to make this into something substantial where we can actually make those types of changes that we so desperately need. And I think could potentially happen. But we got to start somewhere. Let's start here locally. Sign up to volunteer if you haven't already. Make sure that if you can contribute, you do. Because every little bit counts. Can't stress that enough. If you want to be a part of this change that we desperately need, make sure you get involved. I know everybody who's here has great concerns about what's going on. So let's fight that fight together. Appreciate you all. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do, and we'll see you Friday.